Do you remember playing the game Whack Attack? Armed with a plastic hammer, your challenge was to whack the heads of 5 plastic critters and keep whacking those critters, because as quickly as you whack, they pop back up. It was a game all about reactions. Or perhaps you're more familiar with that moment on your driving test when the examiner hit his clipboard on the dashboard and you had to come to an emergency stop. We react to things all of the time. It's simply part of being alive. Someone rings the doorbell, so we get up to answer the door. It starts to pour with rain, so we put up our umbrella. We feel thirsty, so we make ourselves a brew. We constantly react and respond to the world around us. The natural world does it too. Flowers bloom towards the sun. Hedgehogs hibernate. Birds migrate. All as a response to their experience of the world around them. But today I want to share with you a few thoughts, not on our response to the world around us, but on our response to God. The Bible tells us the story of God making the first move. We read of a God who reached out to humanity, sought relationship with his creation, and sent his Son as the ultimate expression of his love for us. Our sin and disobedience formed a huge chasm between our broken selves and a holy God. But because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, that chasm was bridged. We can come close to God, to worship him, to know his love, and to feel his embrace. But each of us has a choice over how we react and respond to God's invitation. God offers us his love, grace, and compassion, but he too gives us free will. Whenever we read, hear, or see something, we have to choose whether to believe it and embrace it, or doubt it and reject it. 19th century US President Abraham Lincoln said this: "If it is on the internet, then it must be true and you can't question it." Or maybe he didn't. Fake news is a term whose use has surged over recent years, but it has a long history. Here's just a few fake news stories for you that may have fooled a few thousand people. In the 2016 US presidential election, Harambe, a dead gorilla, got 11,000 votes to be president. A couple of years later, a lottery winner was arrested after dumping $200,000 worth of manure on his ex-boss's lawn. And then just last year, the COVID lockdown saw nature begin to heal in Venice, encouraging dolphins to cruise down the canals. And these are just the amusing tip of the iceberg of fake news. How you respond to the stories of President Harambe, a rather whiffy garden, and a delightful dolphin resurgence will have little impact on your life. But how you respond to the news of Jesus will transform your today, your tomorrow, and your eternity. As Jesus walked through the towns and villages of the Middle East, he encountered countless individuals who were forced to consider how they would react to him. How would they respond to the news of the miracles he apparently performed? How would they respond to the stories he told and the things that he taught? How would they respond to the claims that he was the Messiah, the Son of God? Would they reject it all as fake news, viewing this man as a conjurer or a madman? Or would they believe with their heads and their hearts that this was the real living God in their midst? Or perhaps they were torn and went with the middle ground, taking him as a nice, kind, religious teacher. 2 millennium on, as the teaching, miracles and actions of Jesus are revealed to us through Scripture, we too face that same choice of how to respond. For some people, the evidence lacks any credibility. The stories are too far-fetched and their current reality suggests Jesus is fake news. For now. For others, the evidence is compelling. The stories are transformational and their life experiences lead them to the conclusion that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But many people, both those who would call themselves Christians and those who would not, find themselves sitting on the fence. But C.S. Lewis powerfully says this: Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. The gospel of Jesus is so radical, so countercultural, so dramatic that there can be no half measures. Jesus isn't someone who can sit alongside the other desires and dreams of our lives. Jesus isn't an add-on when it's comfortable and safe. Missionary James Hudson Taylor said this: Christ is either Lord of all, or he is not Lord at all. Each of us are on diverse journeys of faith. We all arrive at critical points in our lives where we have to make decisions about our purpose, our passions, and our plans. And each of us too come to points where we have to decide how we will respond to Jesus. This week I was reading about the conversion of theologian and priest John Stott, which came during a talk at his school's Christian Union by Reverend Eric Nash. Stott says this: Eric's text was Pilate's question during Jesus' trial. What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ? That I needed to do anything with Jesus was an entirely novel idea to me, for I had imagined that somehow he had done whatever needed to be done, and that my part was only to acquiesce. This Mr. Nash, however, was quietly but powerfully insisting that everybody had to do something about Jesus, and that nobody could remain neutral. Either we copy Pilate and weakly reject him, or we accept him personally and follow him. In that moment, Stott recognised the need to respond to Jesus. He could have chosen to reject him, but instead he chose to embrace him and went on to be used powerfully by God as a leader of the worldwide evangelical movement. And from one of the world's most influential theologians, we move on to the lyrics of the Hokey Cokey, which has brought joy to many children's parties. You put your whole self in, your whole self out. That's what it's all about. The response to God sending his son Jesus to live, die and rise again for all of humanity can be nothing less than our whole self. Jesus himself says, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross and follow me. Of course, with free will, we can choose to respond to the news of Jesus in whatever way we wish. But the only appropriate and fitting response to the wholehearted surrender of Jesus for us is the wholehearted surrender of us for Jesus. Let me tell you the story of a chicken and a pig who were walking down the road together. They see a sign outside a church which reads, "Church lunch, ham and eggs." The chicken says to the pig, "We ought to drop in and make a contribution." The pig replied, "To you it would be a contribution, but to me it would be a sacrifice." Now for the chicken, it would be about giving out of what it could spare. For the pig, it was about giving its all. The story of Jesus is that compelling, that significant, that transformational, that our response should be more than a half-hearted contribution which costs us nothing. It should be giving our whole self to God, knowing that through giving our all, we start on the greatest adventure of all. Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon says this: "I would recommend you either believe God up to the hilt or else not to believe at all. Believe this book of God, every letter of it, or else reject it. There is no logical standing place between the two. Be satisfied with nothing less than a faith that swims in the deeps of divine revelation. A faith that paddles around the edge of the water is poor faith at best. It is little better than a dry land faith and is not good for much." The call of faith, to follow Jesus, to be a Christian, isn't one to respond to lightly or half-heartedly. But if we choose to respond like the first disciples, by dropping our nets and following him, our lives will be more fulfilled than we could ever imagine. And the promises of God will come alive in our lives. Perhaps today is the day you need to put your whole self in, maybe for the first time or for the 50th. But as you reflect in these moments, hear these words from Hillsong United. "You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery. In oceans deep my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours and you are mine." God bless you.